On the day that school resumed, Folake reluctantly drove her daughter to the school. It was called St. Mary Boarding School for Girls. The whole ride there, something told her to turn around and go back home, but she kept driving forward. Once upon a time, in a town called Ibadan, there lived a woman named Folake. Folake was kind and loved by everyone. She was the wife of a pastor, a well-respected man in town, and people often commented how well he treated her. He showered her with love and affection and attended to her every news. From the outside, it seems like Folake had it all: a loving husband, a nice house, cars, fancy clothes, and jewelry. But she was not happy as she pretended to be in public. All her life, she had wanted a baby, and since she got married, she and her husband had tried everything to conceive, but nothing worked. Despite her constant prayer to God, she was still not blessed with a child. Folake was constantly on her knees, crying and asking God why. One day, thankfully, God answered her prayer. Folake became pregnant, and her joy knew no bound. Her husband was over the moon, showering her with even more love and affection than before. Being pregnant, she felt so blessed. As her belly grew, so did the love between her and her husband. They spent evening talking to their baby, dreaming about the future, and preparing the baby's room. The whole town shared their joy, offering congratulations and support. Folake felt like she was carrying a gift in her womb. When the time came, she gave birth to a beautiful heavenly daughter named Adebisi. From the moment Adebisi was born, Folake and her husband showered the baby with love and care. Folake ensured Adebisi had everything she needed to be happy. The home was filled with laughter and joy as Adebisi grew. Folake loved being a mother just as much as she loved being pregnant. She adored watching the daughter's eyes light up with curiosity and delight. She spent hours reading her stories and singing to her. Her husband adored their little girl too, often cuddling her in his arm and whispering sweet words to her. They celebrated every milestone from Adebisi's first smile to her first step and first word. Folake grew very attracted to her daughter. As Adebisi got older, they spent every moment together. When Adebisi went to school in the morning, Folake would hang around the school compound, waiting for closing time so she could see her daughter again. She felt a constant ache in her heart whenever they were apart, always worried about her daughter's well-being. Folake took Adebisi everywhere she went. Their bond was so strong that Folake's husband often joked that it was as if one would die without the other. Folake's love for Adebisi was so powerful that she could not bear the thought of anything happening to her precious daughter. That is why, when Adebisi turned 12 years old, it was time for her to go away to a boarding school in a neighboring town. Folake struggled deeply. The school run by the Reverend Sister was the best in the region, while Folake ate the thought of being apart from her daughter for months at a time. She also knew that a good education was crucial for her daughter's future. She wanted only the best for Adebisi. Folake and her husband discussed it for months, and Folake cried when she finally made the decision to enroll Adebisi in the school. On the day school resumed, Folake reluctantly drove her daughter to St. Mary Boarding School for Girls. The whole ride there, something told her to turn around and go back home, but she kept driving forward. Campus was alive with activities when they arrived. Parents and children were everywhere, talking excitedly as they unloaded suitcases from their cars and into the school. Senior students lined up by the school entrance, welcoming everyone and helping the newcomers find their way around the campus. The school compound was beautiful. The girls were neatly dressed and very polite. which gave Folake a good feeling. When everyone was settled in and it was time for parents to leave, Folake held her daughter tightly. She stood by the school gate, tears running down her face as she watched Adebisi follow the senior girl into the campus. She watched Adebisi disappear around the bend, happily chatting with her new friend. She fought the urge to run after her daughter, grab her and take her back home where she belonged, but Folake also knew she had to let go. She got back in her car crying as she drove home and continued the days until she could return to take her daughter back home. The school term was 3 months long, and Folake wished time would fly. She spent those 3 months having constant nightmare and calling the Reverend Sister weekly to check on her daughter, who seems to be doing fine. Months later, on closing day, Folake was the first parent to arrive at the school. She was so excited to see Adebisi that she could barely stand still. She carried a large lunchbox full of her daughter's favorite food, which she had stayed up all night making. As the school gate opened and the students started coming out, Folake eagerly searched for Adebisi's face in the crowd. The atmosphere grew lively as the students spotted their parents and ran to them. Folake waited and waited for Adebisi to show up, standing on her tiptoes as she scanned the crowd. She began to worry when moments later, Adebisi still had not showed up, and the crowd of the students coming out of the gate had reduced. Her heart started beating fast, and her excitement turned to fear. Where was Adebisi? What was taking her so long? Folake stepped inside the gate and started asking around. She asked anyone she could find if they have seen her daughter. The security guard said he had not seen Adebisi leave the campus. Folake asked Adebisi's classmates if they have seen her, and they all said yes, that they have seen her only minutes ago. Calmed Folake a little. Though her heart was threatening to beat out of her chest, she approached the school principal and the teacher, who all confirmed they have seen Adebisi not long ago. But where is she? Folake asked. Panic was growing, making it hard for her to breathe, even though they all claimed to have seen her daughter only moments ago. Something did not feel right. She ran around the campus, searching for Adebisi. She looked everywhere, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. The school authority joined in the searching every inch of the school, yet no one could find Adebisi. Folake's worst nightmare had come true. Where was her daughter? She cried, carried her hand on her head, pacing back and forth, and she could not breathe. People were talking to her, but she could not even hear anyone. This could not be happening to her. She closed her eyes and prayed that the nightmare would be gone by the time she opened them. But when she opened her eyes, Adebisi was still missing. It was getting dark at this point, and the school principal suggested that everyone should go home and continue the search the next morning. That was when Folake lost her mind. She started screaming at the principal. How could you suggest such a thing? What if my daughter needs me? This is all your fault. My daughter is missing because of your negligence. You will pay. I will make you all pay if you don't find her soon. Folake spent that night at the school, circling the school compound and calling out to her daughter, hoping she would hear her. She checked under benches and looked behind buildings, hoping that her daughter was hidden there, playing hide and seek. By morning, she still had not found Adebisi. Her husband, who had been on a business trip, arrived at the school the next morning. He was just as heartbroken. Folake tried to explain what had happened to her husband, but her voice failed her. She tried to cry, but her tears had dried up from crying the whole night. Without knowing where her daughter was, she felt empty inside. She felt like a deflated balloon. Every minute spent without her daughter made her want to lie down and die. Reluctantly, she followed her husband home. The police were all over the campus now, looking for Adebisi. There was nothing Folake and her husband could do other than wait. Folake prayed that it was all just a nightmare, but it was no nightmare. One day turned into 2, then a week, and still no sign of Adebisi. Folake and her husband called in every favor they had and used every resources at their disposal, but Adebisi was still nowhere to be found. She had simply vanished. There was no trace, no clue, nothing. It made no sense. How did a 12-year-old girl disappear without anyone seeing her? Everyone was puzzled. After a month of searching, the pain became unbearable for Folake, not knowing where her daughter was or if she was okay. Was the worst punishment for a mother. 1 month turned into 2, then a year, and Folake lost all hope. With each day that passed, she lost the will to live. Her husband did everything he could to keep her secret up, but she no longer felt connected to the world like she did when she had her daughter. She stopped eating and taking care of herself, and eventually she fell ill. One day, she simply died from heartbreak, unable to live in a world without her daughter. Her family and the people of the town mourned her deeply, hoping that her soul would go to heaven. To ensure it, they buried her in her favorite shoe, a pair of pointed red high heels her daughter had picked out for her as a birthday gift. But Folake's soul did not go to heaven as her family and the people of the town had hoped. Instead, her ghost roamed the highway of her daughter's old school, endlessly searching for Adebisi. Every night, her ghost will wander out of the darkness and circle the school campus, just as he had done on the day her daughter went missing. She would lift objects and drop them, check under benches, and peek behind buildings. At midnight, on the dot, feeling frustrated about not being able to find her daughter, she would walk into the girls' hostel. She stopped by each girl's bed to check if the girl sleeping was Adebisi. She lingered longest by the bed her daughter once slept in, touching the face of the girl who slept there and whispering her daughter's name. When there was no response, she would sigh in disappointment and leave, only to return the next night. The students of St. Mary, of course, did not know the full story, who Folake was, or why her ghost haunted their school. All they knew was that there was a ghost and they called it Koi Koi. After the clicking sound her high heels made as she walked into the hall, no one ever saw the ghost face or full figure, only the red blood heels walking up and down the hostel hall, seemingly without a body. The students were terrified of the ghost. It became an unspoken rule that everyone had to be asleep before midnight just to avoid hearing the ghost. Complaints were made to the teachers and parents, with some students begging to be sent to another school, but no one believed them. The adults dismissed it as the overactive imagination of children. One girl in particular, named Bolaji, had been especially haunted by the ghost. She slept in the same bed that has once belonged to Adebisi, while the ghost only briefly visited the other girl's bed. It lingered by Bolaji's bed for minutes, sometimes up to an hour, touching her and whispering to her. This made Bolaji deeply uncomfortable and kept her from sleeping at night. She wanted it to stop. She desperately wanted the ghost to leave her alone. One day, Bolaji decided to take matter into her own hand. She gathered 2 of her friends and told them about her plan to confront the ghost. The plan was simple. When the ghost came that night, they would stay awake and ask it what it wanted. Bolaji's friends were hesitant and terrified, but they eventually agreed. That night, they waited until midnight. When everyone else was asleep, they sat up in Bolaji's bed, their hearts pounding with fear. When the ghost entered the hostel, its blood-red hue Clicking again, Bolaji called out, "Hello?" The heel stopped moving. Bolaji's friend panicked and dove under the bed, leaving her alone. But Bolaji stayed where she was, trembling yet determined. The ghost started by the voice of Bolaji's voice, turned towards her. It hesitated, then began walking in her direction. As it approached, Bolaji could feel her heart pounding in her chest. When the ghost stopped a few steps away, she could see it more clearly. It was not just a pair of high heels anymore. The figure of a woman began to materialize like smoke, coming together to form a shape. The woman was frail and pale, her makeup smoked, her eyes soaking, and her dress hung loosely on her thin frame. Bolaji swallowed her fear and introduced herself. "My name is Bolaji," she said softly. "What are you looking for?" The ghost, shocked that someone was speaking to her, hesitated. Then, for the first time in years, she spoke. "I'm looking for my daughter," she said. Her voice trembled with emotion. Bolaji listened as the ghost told her story. She spoke of Adebisi, of the joy she brought to her life, of the pain of losing her, and of her desperation to find her. Bolaji was moved to fear by the story. She no longer felt afraid of the ghost. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of sympathy. "I will help you find her," Bolaji said. The ghost looked at her, tears streaming down her face. "You will?" "I promise," Bolaji said. "But I need you to stop coming to our hostel. It's making it hard for us to sleep. Please give me some time to look for her." The ghost hesitated. The thought of not searching for her daughter terrified her, but there was something about Bolaji's earnest expression that gave her hope. 2 weeks, the ghost finally said. "You have 2 weeks to find my daughter. I will stay away from this hostel until then." Bolaji nodded. "Thank you. I promise I will do everything I can to find her." The ghost disappeared, leaving Bolaji alone with her thoughts. As the hostel returned to silence, Bolaji realized the humility of what she has just promised. She had no idea where to start, no idea if Adebisi was even alive, and she only had 2 weeks to find her. "What have I got myself into?" she whispered to herself, trembling. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share, and stay tuned for part 2.